Hello, I'm Tim Tamashiro. If you love the tales of tasty tunes, welcome to the YouTube edition of Hit Story. On this edition, you'll hear the rock and roll song inspired by a stupid who fired off a flare gun at a rock concert. This is the hit story of Smoke on the Water. This tale is really something. Well, hello there and welcome to Hit Story. This is a podcast that shares fascinating tales behind hit songs and the people who create them. Well, the goal of this podcast is to give you some context for songs that you already love, and hopefully the songs will become even more meaningful to you after you hear these stories. My name is Tim Tamashiro. This edition of Hit Story is all about the incredible string of events that surround the legend of a Deep Purple classic hit song called Smoke on the Water. It all began with an idiot who brought a flare gun to a concert. When the band members of Deep Purple made their way to Montreux Theatre on the afternoon of December 4th, 1971, they had a plan for the day. They would have one last hurrah, taking in some great music before they started the long process of recording their new album. Their friends Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention were playing a matinee show at the casino. And if Frank lived up to his reputation, then the show was bound to be freaky. Little did they know that December 4th would become one of the freakiest days of their lives. The aftermath would soon lead Deep Purple to a restaurant where they watched the Montreux casino burn to the ground in a spectacular blaze. It was the biggest fire they had ever seen in their lives. As they watched the carnage, their hopes of recording their new album in Switzerland seemed impossible. Why? Well, they were supposed to be recording that album in the Montreux Theatre at the casino. And in a few hours, that theatre would be nothing but cinders. A haze of smoke laid across Lake Geneva like a thick carpet. So much for Deep Purple's well-laid plans. And oh my God, Deep Purple had rented the Rolling Stones mobile recording studio. It's parked right next to the casino. Did it survive, or did it go up in smoke like everything else? Flashback to the year 1968. The Rolling Stones were growing tired of the time and energy challenges that were involved in being tied to a recording studio. The lads were dreaming up new ways where they could be more comfortable when they were creating new music. After all, their inspiration didn't magically appear during the 9-to-5 schedule of a recording studio, so they needed to create a situation where they could have a recording studio 24 hours a day. The Stones were throwing around an idea. They could record at Mick Jagger's house. Mick had just bought a lovely country house. It would be perfect. There was lots of housing for everybody, and he had plenty of space for every instrument they could dream of. They just needed to figure out recording equipment, reel-to-reels, microphones, figure out how to turn a country house into a recording studio. They had the money and the resources to build their dream recording situation. But road manager and pianist Ian Stewart offered an even more practical solution. Why not build a mobile recording studio that the Stones could just take with them any place they went? Holy cow, that's an amazing idea, everybody thought. So Ian began plans to build a custom-built recording studio inside a giant cube truck. And in the end, they would name their creation the Rolling Stones Mobile Studio. Well, you know, the Stones made very good use of their mobile studio. They recorded their album Sticky Fingers with it, and then Led Zeppelin used it to record their album Led Zeppelin 3. Other famous bands used it too. It was the first mobile recording studio ever built, and it was in demand too. If the Stones weren't using the studio, they could always put it up for rent. Deep Purple had heard about this Rolling Stones mobile, and they knew it was up to the task of recording great quality anywhere it could get to. So the band made the necessary arrangements to just rent it and have it brought to Montreux, Switzerland. They planned to use it in December of 1971. They'd scoped out this fantastic theater where they could use the facility for the whole winter if they wanted. They could record at the Montreux Casino because the entertainment complex was closed for the season. It was a fantastic facility, top drawer. Deep Purple had the best theater, they had the best equipment, and the best crew to make an epic album. They just had to wait until December 5th. Deep Purple made the trek to Montreux to begin working on their album. The Rolling Stone Mobile rolled into town a day or two before the recording was scheduled to fire up. The driver found the most perfect parking spot for the truck, too. It was right beside the theater. All they had to do was just string cables through the door. It was now December 4th, 1971. The Montreux Casino just had one more show to present, and it was going to be a doozy, too. It was Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. The boys in Deep Purple thought, hey, why not go and take in the show before all the hard work got started? So that was the plan. Catch Frank Zappa in the afternoon. It was going to be a whole bunch of fun because things always got a little weird at Frank's shows. Nobody could have guessed how freaky things would get that day. Turns out that some stupid brought a flare gun to that concert. You're listening to Hit Story. I hope you're enjoying it so far. My name is Tim Tamashiro. This Hit Story podcast is part of what I love to do. It's part of what is called my Ikigai. It's a Japanese map for creating a meaningful life. Everybody has an Ikigai. To find yours, all you have to do is follow these steps. You do what you love, do what you're good at, do what the world needs, and then find ways you can be paid for your gifts. That's Ikigai. So if you'd like to see Ikigai hard at work, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's called Tim Tamashiro, More Meaningful Me. Just search it up on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Now, what happens when an idiot brings a flare gun to a rock concert? Well, the rest of the hit story of Smoke on the Water happens now. The eager crowd began to shuffle their way into the theater at the Montreux Casino, and there were smiles and laughs. Frank Zappa had a reputation of being a bit strange but lovable. Sometimes he'd do weird things on stage, so the anticipation for the show was thick, and it was going to be a ton of fun. Well, the Deep Purple crew made their way into the concert. They expected great music because Frank and the band made some of the most creative and complex music anywhere. How cool is this? They are seeing him in Montreux. And then the concert began, and the crowd was really digging it. Wait, what was that? From the crowd, a streak of smoke and orange light blasted up towards the roof. Was that a flare, like from a flare gun? Well, yes, it is. Some idiot brought a flare gun to the show. Well, the flare shot directly into the tinder dry roof of the theater. Smoke began to billow. Well, will the show be canceled? What are the chances that a fire could get out of control? Confusion and concern began to spread throughout the crowd. Frank and the band saw what was happening, so they stopped the music and left the stage. People started to slowly meander through the doors to leave. The smoke was getting worse. The crowd still meandered. Why wasn't everybody just getting out of there? Things were starting to get out of hand, and the Deep Purple crew, they packed up and they left. They made their way to a restaurant in disbelief. There was screaming, there was yelling. A guy from Montreux named Funky Claude was yelling at people to leave. He was pushing them out. Get out! The place is on fire! Some concert goers hid in places where they believed they were going to be safe from the flames. Funky Claude found them and pushed them outside. Get out! Leave now! Funky Claude was not going to let anybody stick around. He was a hero that day. Outside, the Deep Purple roadies remembered that the Rolling Stone mobile was parked right beside the theater. So they ran to the truck as fast as they could. They gathered together as many people as they could from the crowd to help push. They put the truck in neutral and pushed it as far away from the fire as they could, and they saved the studio from certain incineration. But the rest of the Deep Purple team sat at a restaurant watching the inferno build. It grew larger and larger, and smoke billowed straight up as fire crews desperately did whatever they could to put this fire out. Nothing worked. The fire was out of control. It burned for hours on end. By the morning, the Montreux casino had burned to the ground. Nothing but embers and ashes remained. Well, it looked as if Deep Purple wouldn't be able to record their album after all. If only there was another place somewhere close where they could use. Remember, the band members only had visas to be in Switzerland for a short window of time. Could they salvage this situation? Well, remember that guy, Funky Claude, who was yelling at everybody to get out of the theater when the fire broke out? Well, it turns out Funky Claude was connected in Montreux. So maybe Funky Claude could help out. Yes, Funky Claude was very connected in Montreux. His real name is Claude Nobs. He's a music guy. He's a fellow with a great future ahead of him, too. Claude is passionate about music and the music business. Interesting fact, Claude Nobs would go on to be the founder of a little jazz festival called the Montreux Jazz Festival. How cool is that? Well, Claude feels bad for the Deep Purple crew. He knows how eager they'd been to record this new album. This massive fire dashed their dreams. So Claude offers to help the band out. He knows that there's an empty hotel literally right beside his house. It's called the Grand Hotel. So he makes a couple of phone calls and hammers out a deal for the band to move in and record there. So the band and their crew did whatever they could to turn the Grand Hotel into a viable space for recording. They used rooms and hallways and mattresses, blankets, whatever they could get their hands on to build a recording-friendly environment. And the trusty Rolling Stone mobile was parked outside. So things were looking up. Well, that burning casino from a few days before still left a strong impression on the hearts and minds of Deep Purple band members. Bassist Roger Glover awoke one night not too long after the blaze. He was having a bad dream. He dreamed about smoke spread out across Lake Geneva. And then a phrase popped into his mind. Smoke on the water. When you imagine the image of smoke spreading out across the surface of a still lake like a blanket of ghosts, it's pretty vivid. Well, Roger Glover came up with the perfect phrase to describe what he had seen with his own eyes, and he shared it with the rest of the band. Smoke on the water. Well, sure, a song with a title like that might be misconstrued as a weed-smoking song, but it's still a cool phrase. A song with that title just begged to be written. Guitarist Ritchie Blackmore was jamming with drummer Ian Pace. So he turned up his guitar and he played the first few notes that he felt. At the time, Ritchie was really into the sounds of Renaissance music, and it had a darkness, and it sounded great on a distorted electric guitar. So Ritchie played down, 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 down. So that sounded cool. It sounded dark and foreboding. It's kind of like a soundtrack for a huge destructive fire, don't you think? A few days later, Ian Gillan wrote lyrics. In fact, he wrote the story about exactly what had happened at the casino. He wrote almost in the form of a once upon a time story. He captured the entire incident, including mentions of their expiring Swiss visas, the Rolling Stone mobile, some stupid with a flare gun, Funky Claude's heroics, and how they ended up recording at the Grand Hotel. His story reads like this. We all came out to Montreux on the Lake Geneva shoreline to make records with a mobile. We didn't have much time. Frank Zappa and the Mothers were at the best place around, but some stupid with a flare gun burned the place to the ground. Smoke on the water, a fire in the sky. Well, they burned down the gambling house. It died with an awful sound. Funky Claude was running in and out, pulling kids out the ground. When it was all over, we had to find another place. But Swiss time was running out. It seemed like we would lose the race. Smoke on the water, a fire in the sky. We ended up at the Grand Hotel. It was empty, cold, and bare, but with the rolling truck stones thing just outside, making our music there, with a few red lights, a few old beds, we made a place to sweat. No matter what we get out of this, I know we'll never forget. Smoke on the water, a fire in the sky. A cool story, bro. But nobody in the band thought that this song was anything special. The song was kind of like a little joke song. It was a fable about what they had gone through. They didn't have anything universal that any other person could get into. Funky Claude was still feeling pretty bad about what had happened to Deep Purple. He wanted the guys to feel a little bit more appreciated, so he invited everybody in the band and crew to come to his house for dinner one night. And yeah, the lads would be thrilled to come for supper. They were genuinely thankful, because after dinner, the fellas had a surprise for Claude. They played him that song about the disaster that had befallen all of them, including Claude, a few days before. They told him, it's nothing special, it's not going to be on the album or anything, but we hope you like it. This is called Smoke on the Water. Then they played it for Claude. Funky Claude was astounded by this song. He loves it. He thought it was an incredible tune, not only because he was mentioned in it, but because it has an amazing story with a sick melody and a crunchy guitar. Claude tells the band that they'd be crazy not to include that song on the album. And it turns out that Deep Purple needed more songs to complete the album, so why not record it and include this silly little song, Smoke on the Water, on their album. They're going to call this album Machine Head. When the Machine Head album is released in 1972, Smoke on the Water kind of languished. It was released as the third single on the album a full year later. But when it was finally released, Funky Claude's prediction came true. Deep Purple would have been crazy not to put that song on the album. The band members didn't think that Smoke on the Water would be much of a hit on the radio, but it climbed all the way to number 4 on the Billboard Pop Singles chart, and it was a huge hit all over the world. And it all started because some stupid brought a flare gun. And that's the hit story of Smoke on the Water. Thanks so much for listening to Hit Story. If you enjoyed yourself, you can subscribe to the podcast and get a new hit story every Saturday until I run out of songs. Now, if you're passionate about this podcast, you can become a patron of Hit Story by offering a small financial stipend to my Patreon page. Patreon allows supporters just like you to provide financial support for quality content. You can give $3, $5, $7, $10 at a time if you like. If you love Hit Story, support it. And that will keep the lights on and the internet available and new ideas coming so this podcast can continue. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to Hit Story. I'm Tim Tamashiro. Stay cool.